Hey there, David Coe at the Real Estate Group. I hope you're doing well. Today I want to talk about something that I'm sure a lot of people have been discussing, even those of you not in the real estate industry, and that is NAR's $418 million settlement to resolve this kind of class action antitrust lawsuit that we've been involved in. This is something that's been going on for about a year now, and one of the biggest impacts of this is just the speed now in which the changes that are coming to the industry are going to take effect. We've been kind of internally thinking that this was going to go through years of appeals and everything else, but these settlements are now looking to start and come into effect sometime this year, or maybe even as early as July. So what is this settlement about? Where there are three kind of key components to this settlement that I think are going to have the biggest changes. The first one is on the practice of a listing agent working with the seller to provide a standard commission agreement for both their services as a listing agent as well as for the buyer's agent on the buyer side. So, while that number has always been negotiable, and some of you have negotiated that with me in the past, I think the biggest thing that's going to come out of this is that whether or not a seller wants to offer a commission to a buyer's agent is going to be where the biggest change will happen. Do we think it should happen? We do. We definitely think that there are reasons from the seller standpoint to offer a buyer a commission. There's two main reasons. Number one, if you're a first-time home buyer, which, these days is any property $1.2 million or lower, which I know sounds ridiculous that $1.2 million is the price of a first-time home buyer, but that is the reality, in our market today. And someone who is scraping up just enough money to cover their down payment, they may not have the cash to also pay a realtor to represent them. So the theory being that, well, in that case, I won't have a realtor. I'll just go directly to the listing agent. Well, from a listing agent standpoint, if I have buyers coming directly to me that want me to write offers, I am now in a position called dual agency, which I don't ever want to be in. As a listing agent, I have a fiduciary to my seller to do what's best for them in the transaction. But if I have that same fiduciary to a buyer, I basically turn into a glorified paper pusher where all I'm doing is pushing information back and forth, but I can't be a fiduciary to both sides at the same time. So we still believe in buyer's agents. How much a seller wants to offer some kind of compensation is going to be what we'll discuss when we sit down to negotiate a listing contract. Number two in the settlement is the removal of the buyer's commission from the MLS. So right now, that is actually a field when I input a listing into the MLS on how much compensation the seller is willing to offer the buyer. Well, now that field will be removed. So even if a seller is willing to offer some kind of compensation, the process in which that information gets disseminated is going to be one of the bigger things that we have to kind of wait and see how this unfolds. We may be able to put it in the agent remarks. We may be able to put it into even the public comments, or as a buyer's agent, you may have to just get on the phone and start calling everyone that has a listing to see whether or not there's some kind of compensation available on the buy side. But it's definitely going to take more time now because of this for buyers to help their clients find a property, especially if they've got some kind of listing agreement or some kind of buyer's agreement with their buyers stating there's going to be a set price for helping them to buy that home. And then lastly is, it's always been a recommendation from the brokerage side that if you are working with a buyer, you get some kind of buyer representation agreement. This will now become mandatory, right? Like there's no way as a buyer's agent, you can start working with your client, showing them properties if you don't have some kind of written agreement in place, just like we have on the listing side. I would never sell a property until I had a signed listing agreement. But on the buy side, sometimes we would start showing properties and then we would only sign that agreement once we actually found something that the buyer liked. Not anymore. Now, as a buyer, you need to sign a buyer representation agreement with your agent, and it'll be incumbent upon the agent to explain why, what value they provide for that compensation. And there's a lot, right? Helping you navigate through finding a property, helping you navigate through the inspection process, helping you navigate through the loan process. Buying a home is very, very complicated. And if you as a buyer want someone to advocate for you, having a buyer's agent is very, very important. But how that buyer agent gets paid is probably where the biggest part of this settlement is going to unfold over the next few years. So, like I mentioned, those are the three key parts of this agreement. It is a bit of the wild, wild west, and I'm sure a lot of information is going to, be coming out in the next year or so as this gets implemented. So how does it affect you? Well, that's a great question. It kind of depends on whether you're a buyer or a seller, what your price point is, and so many different factors. And if there's somehow that we can sit down with you and help you figure out how this new law affects you, we'd love to do that. So feel free to give me a call, one of the agents from my team, and let us sit down with you and walk through what your options are as a buyer or seller of real estate. David Coe with the Coe Real Estate Group. I hope this information has been useful, and I hope to talk to you soon. Take care.